Hi, I'm John Ballion. Although I studied to be a photographer, I've spent most of my life licensing other photographers' images at Top Photo, one of the world's largest press photo archives. In this online course for EU Kaleidoscope, I'm going to show you some of the processes that went in to build a 1950s photo feature and challenge you to create your own, replicating the 1950s techniques in a 21st century setting. So in the second part of this online course, I'm hoping to inspire you to go out and take some photographs by replicating a photo feature of the 1950s. The one I've chosen is a set on London's Victoria Station, and I've selected it because it's an easy go out there and see what happens type of feature, which can be done in any similar location around Europe or the world. I plan to head off to 21st century Victoria Station to get an authentic comparison 70 years on. So there are over 60 images in the original set, and firstly I noticed they're all square format, so it's very likely they were taken on a Rolleiflex camera. I happen to own an old Rolleiflex that I bought as an undergraduate at university when film was still king. It is a twin lens reflex camera, one lens for viewing and the other one takes the image. It has the complication that everything in the viewfinder is back to front, and it has a fixed 80mm lens which brings everything a little bit closer when compared to a standard camera phone. The Rolleiflex photographer generally look down into the viewfinder, so the default position of the camera is at waist level, but enterprising press journalists could periscope the camera, holding it above their heads, still seeing what was in frame. A great example of 1950s photographers in action is shown here, as they try and capture Hungarian footballing legend Puskás just before the 1954 World Cup final. There were three main film formats that the 1950s press photographer used, typified by three main camera brands. Speedgraphic, made by Graflex, which shot 5 by 4 inch film, or 12.5 by 10 centimeters if you use metric. The Rolleiflex, which shot 2.25 inch film, which is 6 centimeters square, and Leica, which shot 35mm film, and this image has all of those camera types and films. So at the right you can see the larger 5x4 cameras, including the iconic Speedgraphic, which has the large flashbulb attachment. Squashed in the front of the group are a pair of photographers with Rolleiflex cameras. One is winding his film, and at the back we have the Rolleiflex users in full periscope mode. Looking straight up the viewfinder, they can frame their shot above their heads, unlike the 5x4 shooters who have to guess. 1, 2 and 3 completely obscured, a fourth just finished shooting, and even a fifth. In front of him is a woman with a Leica as identified by the distinctive viewfinder, and you'll also see she wears another one around her waist, which was common practice, either because it was mounted with another lens or just loaded with film ready for continuous shooting. Finally, in the middle of the pack we see yet another 35mm photographer. Before I go out and shoot, I want to take a closer look at some of the elements that the original photographer thought it was worth capturing to see if I can take similar subjects as a visual comparison from the 1950s to today. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff here. To start, we have a couple of general shots, an outside view, an entrance view, and obviously the clock is a big feature which I trust is still there. The photographer did go one further with the meet you under the clock at Victoria Station cliché. I'm not convinced that that would have been by chance, but you know, it's a nice picture. There are also a couple of elevated views which might be difficult, as I can't recall if there's any access to photograph at that angle to match those images. It is interesting that there are not many train views, probably because the photographer didn't want to buy a ticket to get on the platform, but there is one nice one of the front of the London-Paris night ferry service. Eurostar doesn't go from Victoria, but Victoria Station does have the Gatwick Express, so I might be able to get a picture of that. There are also a couple of shots of deposits and withdrawals. I initially thought the images were finance related, especially under the Woolwich equitable advertising, but it's actually the cloakroom. In saying that, we do have a man at the bureau de change. Also captured is a speak your wake machine in maintenance and the public bar. complete with a child who has been made to wait outside. The main bulk of the feature is all about people. We have diversity to illustrate that the station was the gateway to the world, workers on a break, nuns on the move, backpacking types with a bicycle, business and professional types, a man giving a woman flowers, people rushing for the train, people waiting, someone getting directions, buying coffee, police, someone being carried away on a stretcher, family groups, and even a dog collecting money for charity. I've also written down departure boards, barriers, advertising, and luggage. One of the things I know I won't be able to capture is porters pushing luggage about. In any case, it makes a good running list of subjects, and I'm sure I can cover at least part of it. With any luck, I can add a few more on top. I'm not going to use my Rolleiflex to revisit this feature, but instead I'm going to use my mobile phone. It is far from the latest model, and it isn't the best resolution. It's indiscreet, ubiquitous, which is great for street photography, where you really want to catch people being natural. For some authenticity in matching the Rolleiflex shots, however, I'm going to change the camera setting to square and mono. Next step is to head off to the station and get shooting. So here I am at Victoria Station, and I'm really disappointed that the clock is no longer here. I've asked an older gentleman who instantly said, "Meet you under the clock at Victoria Station." They were astonished that they hadn't realised the clock had gone. Apparently the station had been completely redone in the 1980s, and it now has a large central shopping block, which is where I'm standing now. All in all, it's not a great start, so I'm just holding my breath for the rest of the shoot. Anyway, I'm going to capture the general scenes first, and then I'll see how I'm going to get on with my checklist. I'm back from the station after photographing for 2 hours or so. I was about to wrap it up when my phone ran out of battery. It's a bit like a 1950s photographer running out of film. I was really pleasantly surprised during the shoot at the number of subjects I managed to cover. But looking at that 1950s set again, I just can't compete with its originality or its quality. But I will leave you to judge how well I got on in my 21st century remake. The exterior is much the same, but I matched the building view, and in hindsight, I really needed to be back across the street to get the bus depot in. And although the station got quite busy while I was there, I only found a few people outside as I arrived, so I didn't really get a great shot there. The wide sweeping elevated views were impossible to match as suspected. Previously mentioned is the absence of the beautiful clock, despite the retention of these roof awnings, which are, quite impressive. So my best effort at the meet you under the clock was this. If we go back to the first shot, we can actually see that old wall clock is also present in that 1950s shoot, and it's also seen here in this entrance shot. The layout of the whole entrance and everything is different. I tried to match the dark aesthetic here, and for the sign I captured this one, which now shows that Victoria Station has an extra 2 platforms, 9 to 19. As for the London-Paris night ferry, the best branding of the Gatwick Express was from here. In regards to deposits and withdrawals, there's no cloakroom, but there are plenty of withdrawals going on. And with the number of foreign visitors still passing through Victoria, there's also a large currency exchange building right inside the station. For an open speak your weight machine, I managed to match a ticket machine under maintenance. Not too bad. So the bar is a much less grand affair now, and it's up on that elevated shopping mall. And in 21st century Victoria Station, I can tell you that they want children under 12 to be seated in the bar. London has always been a cultural city, but I must admit in the 1950s it was rarer to see so much diversity captured in one set of film. 21st century London is now one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the whole world, and I think that is reflected in all of my pictures. It can be seen in as much from the people who actually work in the station. Unlike the workers on the rest break in the 1950s, I can tell you all the workers I came across were non-stop. Nuns on the run were a no-go. Backpackers, however, tick. Bicycle, tick. And tick. Professional briefcase types, yes and yes. No bowler hats in sight, not many hats at all actually, but umbrellas, yes. And young professionals on the move, as always. Although I spotted a flower shop, I was doubtful that I was going to catch this cliche, but I'm happy to report that romance is still alive and well in Victoria Station. People running, however, were harder to catch. My best effort was this mother zooming by with a pram, and her son following struggled with the case as he rushed in front of me. Even the people on the move were quite difficult, especially the ones that were just a little bit different, which caught the corner of your eye, and you turned round, photographed, and you got it or you didn't. As for waiting, there are loads of people waiting around, I can tell you. And of course, the mobile phone now helps pass the time for some. For others, they'd just been waiting far too long. Gladly no one was carried away while I was there, but I do notice that in the 1950s Victoria Station shot of that event, there's a general waiting room sign. 70 years on, it has a meeting point. I expect for most it's just an empty seat to sit on. Directions. Yes, plenty of pointing, and not always by the staff. I witnessed lots of confirmatory pointing at the departure boards. Hot drinks, anyone? Yes, there's plenty of coffee on offer, but the crockery shortage is now so severe that the only proper cup available collects the tips. I didn't hold out too much hope of capturing police on film, although I had considered my presence in the station under the constant gaze of CCTV might attract some questions. By the time I saw police walking across the concourse, I was so thrilled to tick another box on my list that I literally ran over and boldly shot them in action without any thought of retribution. I have to point out you can't be too careful, however. Yes, it's a public space and editorial street photography would be dead if you had to ask everybody before you photograph them, but you still need to have some consideration, especially if you're not teaming up with a journalist who is gathering the stories from the people you've just shot. This is the main reason that, although the original showed some amazing pictures of children, I was more conservative in my shooting of them. As for the child donating to the charity dog, well, I did get some charity workers. These were the gentlemen who informed me about the clock. And I also got a dog. Notice also how the 1950s photographer got down low at the level of the dog and the child when capturing. And although I thought I crouched low enough when I was photographing this dog, I really needed to get even lower. I did do a little bit better when I put the phone down on the ground to capture this pigeon, but I was unsighted, so my angle is slightly askew. Yes, all ages frequent Victoria Station, and there's still plenty of time for discussion between trains. There is often a queue for tickets, but there are modern ways around this. There are also plenty of barriers to the platforms. I was also keen to capture the process of entry as passengers made their way through to the platform, and also as crowds made their way from the train out into the concourse. I noticed by chance, looking closer at this one, I didn't plan it, but I also happened to capture a crowd exiting platform 17. There is no surprise that luggage is in abundance. But what I had not anticipated was the modern porter exists in the guise of an assistance vehicle, but of course, most travellers are resigned to pushing the bags themselves. The departure boards are now digital, but they are the point of focus for the majority of passengers in the station. The advertising is always smiling, even if the audience are less excited of their travels. Advertising and marketing is now also personal, but beware, you might have to trade your photograph for a 10-minute survey. I doubt if the 1950s photographer had to share the space, but I found that I was not the only photographer on the day. Indeed, some were much more equipped. As a sign of the times in this extra shot, I found a prominent water bottle fill-up station. Do we dare suppose that Victoria Station didn't have a water fountain in the 1950s? I'm sure it would have had plenty of hugs. For me, I felt it was just another great shot that got away, as the two shown here are fairly poor compared to the full running wide open hug that I missed. My parting extra shot is a challenge to the photographer of 2085. I have to admit that I was really surprised to find public telephones in Victoria Station, and can you believe it? A public telephone in use. Overall, I've shown you 80 or so images of mine here that I've already edited, and if you saw part 1 of this online course, Ken Russell only got 8 images used over 4 pages. So the big question is, do I have 8 images that capture Victoria Station as it is today? I would like to think so, and I've written some text and mocked up a dummy feature in the exact same layout as the Ken Russell piece. But regardless, it was a lot of fun, and I hope it might inspire you to pick up whatever camera you have and to go out and capture life as it is to reflect on a page or screen.